Dr. Ellen Dorrit Hoffleit was born in Florence, Alabama on March 12, 1907. She was the youngest of two children born to German immigrants, and her father often struggled to make ends meet for his family. When she was still small, her family moved to Newcastle, Pennsylvania, following the opportunity for her father to work for the railroads and for her and her older brother Herbert to attain an education. In 1920, Dorrit moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts with her mother and brother when Herbert was admitted to Harvard. She would follow him and enter Radcliffe College a few years later, receiving a BA in mathematics in 1928. After graduation, she took a job at Harvard College Observatory as a research assistant. She went on to become the fifth woman to receive a PhD from Radcliffe and was awarded the Carolyn Wept Prize for Best Original Dissertation for her work on spectroscopic determination of absolute magnitudes for southern stars. Dr. Hoffleit left Harvard College Observatory in 1943 when she joined the war effort at Aberdeen Proving Ground. After the war, she continued there for 3 years before returning to Harvard to her research and to new Southern Hemisphere plates collected specifically for her work. Unfortunately, after Donald Menzel assumed the HCO directorship in 1954, her research program was canceled. As a result, in 1956, she moved to Yale Astronomy Department. In 1957, she was appointed the director of Maria Mitchell Observatory on Nantucket Island. During the summer, she lived and observed on her island oasis, and in the winter, she worked on the Bright Star catalog at Yale. She and her Maria Mitchell summer research interns are responsible for the discovery of over 1,000 variable stars and the publication of over 90 papers. Dr. Hoffleit's lifetime contributions to astronomy span the fields of meteors, spectroscopic classification of stars, variable stars, missile trajectories, astrometry, and more. She has over 320 papers listed in the Astrophysics Data System. She has countless honors and awards, including the 1988 George von Biesberg Award and the 1993 AES Annenberg Prize. And it's going. Okay. So, like I said, what we wanted to talk about was the state of women in astronomy and where things were and where things are. Now, you're one of these lucky people who got your start because you're a woman and you were cheaper to hire at Harvard.
Right. Right. Not only were women cheaper, but they were more conscientious than the men.
So the men were more expensive and couldn't be trusted?
Right.
So, when you first started at Harvard College Observatory, were there more women working in astronomy than men at that location?
Yes. The men, of course, had professorships, but
right.
For research assistants, there were mostly women, largely because, well, as Shapley said, not only were the women cheaper than the men, but they were more conscientious than the men. I wanted a job teaching high school math when I got my AB degree, but I couldn't get a job, and so I decided to go back to graduate school to make myself better qualified, and then I got a job working with Henrietta Swope as her assistant doing variable star, but I went back Sundays and evenings to do what I pleased at the observatory, which was to work on, I knew there were about 100 photographs that showed photographs of meteors, shooting stars, and so I pulled out all those 100 plates and I measured the light curves for all of them, and just found out that the shape of the light curve depended pretty much on the velocity with which the meteorite hit the atmosphere. And so I had a wonderful time on Sundays and holidays working on my project, but I carefully did what I was being paid for, which was fun too, working variable stars. And then when I finished what I was planning to do for the meteors, I wrote a paper, big fat one, and I put it on Dr. Shapley's desk. He called me into his office and he looked very soft. He says, "What's this?" And I said, "That's what I came in Sundays and evenings to work on." Well, he grumped, and Bart Block was in the office too, and so Bart Block came down and told me that I had to listen to Shapley and not just, this is my business instead of his. But I said, that's what I did Sundays and evenings, and he knew I was there Sundays and evenings because he worked day and night too.
Right.
And so he sort of grudgingly accepted it, but he sent it out for review, and it got good reviews, and from there on, life at Harvard became just wonderful. Well, I think I liked my pet project of doing those shooting stars because that was completely my own choice. Nobody advised me on that. I just did it because I wanted to do it. And I didn't get anybody's advice on it either. And so from there on, he was delighted with my doing meteors because what it amounted to was that he was getting 2 jobs for the price of 1. I got called into the office one day, and Bart Block and Shapley were there, and Shapley said, "We were wondering why you don't continue working for your PhD," because I worked for my MA degree, and I thought that's all I'd be capable of doing, because I wasn't an A student, I was only a B student.
I was a B student as well, I understand.
So anyway, when Shapley wondered why I wasn't continuing for that, I said, "Oh, I don't think I could pass those examinations."
Oh no.
And he says to me, "You go back down to your office and think it over for a few days." So within 10 minutes, Bart Block came into my office, slammed the door shut, and pounded his fist on my desk, and he says, "Dorrit, if God recommends that you do something, it is your duty to do it." Well, of course, I'd already made up my mind, but he'd better know that I wasn't an A student.
Yeah. So today there's a lot of students who are like, "Oh, I could never be an astronomer. I don't get straight A's. Oh, I couldn't be an astronomer. I'm not a complete genius."
Yeah.
What do you tell these students to convince them, I made it and you can make it?
Exactly. Well, you just tell them that you know somebody who was only a B student and got more honors in her long life than anybody else. You see those plaques on that? Those are all awards that I got in my life.
Wow. That's an amazing stat.
So you see, that is what a B student in the topics of her choice and a C student in the required courses, languages and literature.
What did you think when Radcliffe and Harvard combined into a single university?
Well, it was right and proper. After all, Harvard was a man's institution, and Radcliffe was founded by appointing Harvard professors to repeat their courses at Radcliffe for girls, but then in recent years they just decided to make Harvard co-educational. So now it's part of Harvard.
Okay, do you know how many women got PhDs pre-World War II?
Cecilia Payne was the first one, and Annie J. Cannon was the first who got an MA. Miss Cannon, and then Cecilia Payne, and from there on there are always a few.
But those were the big ones that you remember. Now, who was your role model? Who did you aspire to be like?
Well, I don't know that I really tried to aspire to anybody. I aspired to learn the astronomy.
So you're competing strictly against yourself.
Yeah, working hard.
When you got to Yale, it was a very different environment. What was the culture shock going between the two schools?
Well, it's completely different, of course. At Yale, Yale was much more limited in this research work. It specializes in astrometry, positional work of stars, whereas Harvard had a much wider, more diverse, bigger institution.
Right.
So far astronomy was concerned.
How many women were at Yale when you got there?
Oh, about 3 or 4.
And how many total astronomers were there?
About the same number.
Okay, so it was actually half and half.
It was a small department.
So when you started at Harvard, there were a lot of women. When you got to Yale, it was 50% women. Have you seen actually the number of women go down around you over the years?
No. No, after all, more women have been studying astronomy.
But there's only like 30% at the graduate school level.
Well, what percentage of other fields are women?
Biology, they dominate.
Well, of course, most people don't like night work.
That is true. That is true.
After all, you want to go to the movies, not to work.
So what I was saying was you've seen the community go from handwritten correspondences and train rides that take days to get to conferences to instantaneous communications and easy airplane flights. How has the community personality changed with the changing communications?
Oh, I don't think the distribution of personalities has changed that much. Of course, the instruments themselves have improved greatly over the years, but I think when it comes to astronomers, I think most of them started colleges thinking about mathematics and physics rather than astronomy, but because in general, when there are at least a half a dozen courses in either math or physics to choose from, in astronomy there were generally just 2 courses, a beginner's course and a research course.
Right.
So all in all, I don't think things have changed greatly in astronomy, except that in all fields there are larger numbers of people, and percentage-wise, I think astronomy is still a small department. It isn't a subject that people think they can earn a lot of money in. It's a subject that you're interested in, but what is it good for except for keeping time? And you don't want to just observe the sun in order to make sure that your timepiece is correct. But astronomy is, just like literature and fine arts, is not exactly a practical subject except for navigation.
Now, the Mariah Mitchell summer program continues to be one of the ones that students are sort of like, ooh, I want to go there. It's just one of the really sought after ones. You're the one that started that, weren't you?
I started the summer program, yeah.
What made you decide to do that?
Well, it's a small observatory, and as a small observatory, it seemed like a good place to have. See, I couldn't have big classes of students and all that down in Nantucket, but I could offer the school system open nights for a particular grade or something like that. In Nantucket, there were two jobs. One was public relations, which was open nights, and the other was the research, which at that time was primarily on variable stars.
So you've always worked very closely with the American Association of Variable Star Observers.
Oh, yes.
How over the years did that relationship build, and were you any influence in the fact that they've had so many female directors?
Well, the AAVSO was founded at Harvard, had its headquarters at Harvard Observatory, and his successor happened to be a lady. There was a Turkish girl who contacted me and wanted to know if there was any opportunity for her to get a summer job in the United States.
That was Janet Matty?
So that was Janet Matty, and she then got the job at the AAVSO when Margaret Mayall retired, and took that job. And well, she and I collaborated a lot. She ran the AAVSO, and she encouraged students to come down to work for me during the summer. And inversely, if I got some students that she didn't know about, I encouraged her to encourage them to join the AAVSO and give some papers there. So Janet and I were very close together.
You've done a lot to bring probably hundreds of young astronomers, undergraduates and younger, a chance to look through a telescope and do a bit of variable star research.
Oh, sure. I don't know that it amounted to hundreds, but a good number.
If you were to try and guess at how many academic children and grandchildren you had, how many do you think you would have? For instance, Horace Smith was one of my advisors.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure he worked at Mariah Mitchell one summer.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I can count those up at the present time, but I must have had about 100 students all told down on Nantucket.
That must have just been wonderful.
Generally about 4 at a time.
4 at a time over 20 years? And now you're back at Yale again.
Well, I was at Yale at the same time, because I was at Yale in winter and I was in the summer.
That is the correct way to do it. So, you've seen in your lifetime, we have figured out what powers stars. We figured out that there are galaxies outside of our own. We've so many discoveries. Are there any discoveries that you're still hoping that they'll prove this right or wrong while you're still alive to see it?
Well, I don't think I've been thinking about it in that respect, but one always is sort of alert to new things, because as you get better and better instruments as time goes on, then you go out to greater distances to apparently fainter objects, but actually bigger objects at bigger distances.
What do you read about the most today?
What I read most about?
Yeah.
Well, I guess just the news, astronomical news.
In the past couple of years, what do you think has been the most interesting to you of the latest round of discoveries?
Well, I think the extragalactic astronomy gets to be more interesting, because as instruments improve, what you could previously determine was a galaxy merely because it was more fuzzy, tiny object, which looked as though it wasn't quite round because it had rings around it, but you made the object look a little elongated rather than showing a fine detail. But what's nice about astronomy is that with bigger and better instruments you can get farther and farther away, and so maybe you find some objects that are not in our nearby universe.
They're starting to talk about building telescopes that are like 100 meters in diameter for the mirrors. Were things like that even imagined when they were putting together Palomar?
Well, I don't think they were thinking that big, but they certainly weren't going to stop it, what they were doing now.
What was the biggest you ever thought a telescope would get when you were first starting out?
Well, I don't know. The 200-inch came along, and since that came along with a big step from the previous 100 or so, you felt confident that with technology always improving, you'll get better instruments.
Now, when you were little in elementary school, was astronomy in the schools at all?
Not my schools.
So today we're working.
Well, the only science that I had in high school was in my senior year as a physics course.
Really?
That was the only. Well, we had a choice for the college preparatory courses. One had to take either physics or chemistry. Those are the only. I think biology was also available, but it wasn't exactly considered as college preparatory. For college preparatory, the advisors always stressed either physics or chemistry. And since I had a heavy program, I was told I better take physics instead of chemistry because there's twice as much laboratory work in chemistry than there was in physics. And I think in the long run that was the best choice because that was more useful in astronomy than the chemistry would have been.
So today we're trying to get astronomy into all of the schools. What things do you think little kids should all learn about?
Well, I think that the little kids ought to know about the Milky Way. It's something nice to look at, but teach them all about the solar system in detail. And the Milky Way is the background, and when they've mastered the solar system sufficiently, why then look and see what there is in the Milky Way.
So just work your way out from where we stand.
Yeah.
So I know I get asked a lot, why do you do astronomy? What good is it?
Yeah.
How do you answer that question?
I do it because I like it. Since I grew up in poverty, the low salaries, well, they were salaries. I didn't need a high salary in order to go to the movies and the theater and all that because the job itself was sufficiently entertaining.
So it's your first love, your hobby,
Yeah.
your career.
It's my life.